The world is reeling from the biggest financial shock since the Great Depression.
We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis.
From Wall Street to Main Street, money was easy come.
No longer the boom-bust economy.
And easy go. Businesses have failed, lives are in ruin, leadership is being questioned, political legacies rewritten, and our faith in the future shaken.
A trained monkey could have run this country better than the banks.
I don't think you can describe Iceland as the Wild West of capitalism. That's a ridiculous proposition.
Somebody has to apologize. Somebody has to come and say, okay, listen, I did a huge mistake, and I'm going to now resign and show some responsibility here.
Without China's $2 billion a day, our goose would be cooked.
They're dealing with an extraordinary set of circumstances, and they're dealing in a way we should all be proud of.
They're willing to destroy the currency because they would rather deal with that situation than be unable to control panic.
80 years on, the spectre of the Great Depression haunts world leaders, the dark days of deprivation and the hopelessness faced by their forebears.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
President Roosevelt himself admitted that it wasn't Dr. No Deal that solved the problem. It was Dr. War.
Subprime, credit crunch, meltdown, bailout, all loaded words that have stalked the headlines in 2008 and made us all fear for our financial future. A global economic crisis that started in America with a record housing boom, followed by a ferocious bust, beginning a chain reaction that wiped the most illustrious names off the financial map and set roaring economies back decades. Much of the world was living on borrowed money, and finally, the credit ran out.
Iceland has it all: flawless beauty, rich resources, a country unspoiled, and in terms of its geothermal energy potential, still largely untapped. But the natural world wasn't enough. A greater prize lay beyond Iceland's shores in the international economy, where money was said to grow on trees. But the lust for foreign currency has been a shortcut to chaos for Iceland.
In the future, you have to, if you're going to grow your industries and grow as a nation, you have to think in a more sustainable, green way.
Unsustainable without money from abroad were Iceland's ambitious construction projects. Now frozen in time, sites bereft of workers, silent, ghostly memorials to Iceland's financial folly.
We have always had full employment and even overemployment. So those few companies who've had to lay off people, they could always be kind of sure that the employees would find work very soon. But that's not the case now. Now you have to assume that if you're sending somebody out there, he may have great difficulty in finding a job for quite a while.
Marching on Iceland's beleaguered central bank, anarchists have spotted a gap in the political market, seeing opportunity in chaos, stamping their feet for change.
The phrase that's been used a lot is like an international financial storm, which accidentally hit Iceland the worst of all. But I mean, that's no coincidence that we are the country that's been worstly affected, because we did go way ahead of ourselves. You know, we lost all control of our banking system, and all the warnings that we got, we ignored.
In protest, Icelanders draw in centuries-old tradition, casting a spell on the central bank and administering a symbolic spanking to its unpopular governor, David Oddsson.
The government didn't stop the banks over-expanding, so everybody has debts who are now bound to inflation and bound to currency, so people are afraid of losing their homes.
Borga is typical of many homeowners in Iceland. He borrowed money to renovate his home, but was persuaded by the bank to take out the loan in US dollars instead of krona. When the krona collapsed, Borga needed twice the amount of krona to meet his monthly loan repayments. In effect, the cost of his loan had doubled.
Getting a loan to to build a house over a family should never be like gambling, never.
Inflation has always been a huge problem. So to tackle that, the government has tried to raise interest rates in Iceland. And that caused a huge amount of inflows of speculating money and encouraged households to borrow in foreign currency. So for example, typically if you got a car loan, you would borrow in say yen, dollars or euros, not in Icelandic krona, because the interest on those were 4%, while the interest on the Icelandic loans was 15%.
When we took our loan, $1 was 60 kroner. Today, $1 is 144 kroner. And we got the bank at the time to show us the last 5 years, the currency fluctuation. And in the worst case scenario for that period, it was still okay.
But there is little sympathy for Borga among Iceland's political elite. The government didn't hesitate to rescue the banks that borrowed too much foreign cash, but there appears to be a different rule for their customers.
Many people advised against the ordinary citizens taking out loans in foreign currencies. I did that myself several times. So did other responsible people here. If you don't have foreign currency income, don't take loans in foreign currency. It's as simple as that. But unfortunately, several people did, perhaps on the instigation of the banks, which was terrible advice on their behalf. And therefore, a lot of people, unfortunately, are now in very difficult circumstances as a result of this.
By trying to give a whole nation some sort of a guilt feeling and saying, oh, well, you know, you participated, you bought the new TV and you bought this car with all the foreign loans, so it's your fault. I think that's just a diversion.
So there's a lot of blaming the borrower here and a reluctance to help the borrower because they, either were, too ambitious in terms of the kind of home they wanted. They took on more debt than they should. Of course, people who say this don't look into how they were often targeted by fraudulent products.
Yard sales to make ends meet are an increasingly common sight in Californian neighborhoods, a sign of harsh times.
Our economy is in a recession.
It's been hard for the past year, economy is real bad, but I mean, people had their jobs still. And now a lot of people losing their jobs, so they're just, doing what they can in order to get some money.
We're not making enough money to pay the mortgage, so by having a yard sale, we can at least earn something, even if it's just a little.
This street in south-central LA is home to many Mexican migrants in the firing line of America's subprime crisis. Victims, according to some, of predatory lending.
If I don't make one full payment on the mortgage, the first thing they do is go on foreclosure.
It's not just American homeowners who were seduced into borrowing now and paying later. America, the nation, is the world's biggest creditor, owing more than $10 trillion.
Nobody talks about OCM. That's other countries' money. Money coming into the United States that we are dependent on. Without China's $2 billion a day, our goose would be cooked. So most people in America don't know that. They don't really have a clue about it because the media doesn't really educate people about all this, and our schools don't either.
There's a symbiotic relationship with China, for example. They've been shipping cheap goods over here. We've been exporting our manufacturing jobs, and they've been buying our debt, and it goes back and forth. And up until this point, it's been good for the United States. We get to buy cheap stuff and consume it. The Chinese get to build out their infrastructure, and they've had a booming economy for a number of years.
It's not only strong developing economies such as China and the Middle East who are financing America's debt binge, marked here by the country's national debt clock. But much more worryingly, it's also much poorer economies in Africa. Countries such as Kenya and Tanzania are also lending money to America. And this begs the question, is it right for poorer countries to be subsidizing richer countries? And in many ways, this shows the perverse way in which free markets operate.
Since the 1990s, it's been a condition of IMF loans that debtor countries must hold reserves in US bonds. The reasoning being that the economy is too big to fail and the US will always honor its debts.
Is the United States government itself too big to fail? I think there's a lot of people that would like to believe that's true, but history shows that it's not.
Reducing America's national debt isn't a priority for President-elect Obama. He's made it clear that economic recovery comes first at any cost and is expected to ask Congress to approve a financial stimulus package amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars to jolt the American economy back to life.
If we don't act swiftly and boldly, most experts now believe that we could lose millions of jobs next year.
Clearly, the deficit is at an unsustainable level, and we will have to do something to reduce the deficit. However, one thing to remember about many of these rescue packages is many of them are investments. The government is injecting money into various institutions, expecting to get it out with a profit later on.
It's a momentous occasion in our history, the first African-American president, and I think he's got a very short amount of time to use that to his advantage, to use that popular support to his advantage. And it's unpopular to say right now, but his objective in the short to medium term should be to get people to start saving again and invest locally.
Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, is the man seen by many as standing between a recession and a depression. An expert on the Great Depression, he's all too aware of how perilously close America has come to the economic doldrums of the 1920s and 30s.
The historians will look at it as a once-in-a-lifetime event. I think very few people alive today will live to experience an event of this magnitude again. Similar things happened in 1929 in the Great Depression, and this is really something that's quite unique.
The challenge facing America today is to avoid history repeating itself.